Alright, hello everyone. My name is Disc. And in this video we're looking at an 18 Algeth'ar's Academy. And for the week we are Tyrannical, Raging, Storming, and we have the Thundering now. I wanted to start all my videos out with little tidbits of information. And this being my first video of the expansion, it might run a little bit longer and it might not be quite on theme as like what I'm picturing in the future. But before we start this key, I thought it would be a great idea to kind of talk about my spec choice. So this is where I've landed. Power Word Life is amazing. You can use Grid2 to actually change the color of your bars when you're in range. I think that's the best way to maximize that talent. Crystalline Reflection is a power play for this build as well. And then I do go full Mind Games. Just for the record, I've tried just about every combination, and this is just where I've landed. This is what I like. Twilight Equilibrium I think is a fine play. I think it can do just about as good as any of them, but it's harder. And I just really don't think the juice is worth the squeeze, or however that saying goes. It's just too much decision making. You're having to refresh your dots way too often. It's just a lot more work, and I don't think the payoff is worth it. So being a Discipline Priest, I kind of just like being shieldy. So I've gone the Aegis route. Wheel and Woe is great. And then most recently I've spec'd into Exaltation, which I don't know why I wasn't doing that sooner. I just think it's definitely the play when you're going shield build. Also, I use Grid2 for maximizing my absorbs. You'll see as when we get going that I place all my absorb values growing from the left. So it's really easy to compare them. It's really easy to see if a shield is depleted or if it was a critical or regular. And it's just super great to maximize that spell with Grid2. And you just get such good benefit out of it. What I've noticed is in most scenarios, one Rapture can cover 2 mechanics if you time it correctly. So yep, that's about it. And Shadow Covenant, I'm not spec'ing that at the moment, but that may change going into the upcoming patches. I just don't like having one extra button like that. So I go into Long Schism. So I mean, either way you look at it, you're getting a little bit of a damage buff. And with the Long Schism and Harsh Discipline, which is another main play, you can get 2 penance procs within 1 schism if you play your cards right, and I just think that's really powerful. Along with Harsh Discipline, Smite is our best friend. So you basically just have to Fiend for Smite and Fiend for those procs. Without procs, you're kind of nothing. And that being said, Mind Blast falls way down in the priorities as far as like what to cast. I think I actually probably don't even cast Mind Blast once this whole dungeon. We'll see. But Shadow Fiend, you want to keep that rolling. Mind Games, you want to keep it rolling. Divine Star, I don't really use it unless it's an AoE pull. Like if it's a single target boss, I would rather Smite for the procs than press that spell. So I definitely think it's just like an AoE pull type thing. And then the other thing I wanted to mention before we get going is probably the biggest change to my UI going into Dragonflight. I have looked for this solution in the past and I came up dry, but I tried again and I found the answer. And now that shields are so different for us and so much more important to our mechanics, we have a major opportunity to play them. How do I say this? There's a lot of places where you want to shield ahead of an attack. Mainly you want to shield ahead of cast bars. And cast bars are hard to see. If you ask me, it's like one of the hardest things to see. And they're displayed on an enemy's nameplate, which doesn't really tell you much. So what this weak aura does is instead of showing you a cast bar on an enemy's nameplate, it puts a border around the unit frame of who's targeted. So this opens the door for really pro shields. Again, if you play your cards right, you can basically negate entire mechanics, entire attacks. So cast that you get ahead of are usually like 1.5 seconds or less. So you do have to react quick. You really have to be light on your feet. It also demands that you know pulls. So like if you're going into a pull where you know there are targeted casts, you kind of know to be aware and ready to shield that person. Also, there are boss attacks that are cast. We'll see that here. There's party attacks that are cast. There's just a lot of opportunities to really use shield to the benefit of the whole group. And how shields are built into our spec now, this is just absolutely how you want to play it. And so I track my dispelables like I always have, with borders that go around the unit frame. And the way these targeted spells look, instead of being a border, it's a dotted line. So for the most part. So that's kind of the system that I've created. So if it's a dotted line, that's a warning of something incoming. And if it's a solid line, for the most part, that means dispel. So anyway, I think that's all I want to talk about for this video. This was a really good group. It was a complete pug. I take that back. I knew the monk. But the main sell here was we had almost no avoidable damage go out in a group. So if I can instill one thing into you, no matter if you're like you're a disc priest or whatever, knowing where your avoidable damage is and managing your own health pool is the most important thing in Mythic Plus. You can't always say it's a healer mechanic if you're standing in everything. You have to know where your damage is and how to avoid it, and put it at the top of your priority list, and you will have smooth keys. So anyway, let me go ahead and clip over to the video. All right, here we are. Algeth'ar's Academy 19. And off the bat, you still want to be planning where your PIs go. And at this point in time, not everyone has 4-piece, so that does need to come into play in your decisions. And our monk, who is my friend, has 4-piece. So I try and favor him, but I think it goes to the Hunter Sum 2, which is fine. And if you've seen my videos in the past, I use a glow effect on a unit frame for when they cast their offensive. So all that's changed is I've disabled the visual and I've kept the audible. I found with my system that tracks incoming targeted spells and dispellables, that extra glow around a unit frame was becoming distracting. So I got rid of it. I left the audible, and I rely mainly on OmniCD, which you'll see right next to my bars. The audible, I think, is just about all I need. You should be on top of your PIs anyway, so you shouldn't need that visual. And moreover, if you have all 5 units in your party glowing, the effect is lost anyway, if you ask me. So if you download my Weak Aura pack, the visual is still a part of it, it's just been disabled. So a suggestion for that would be, if your monk is your PI target, potentially turn on the visual only for the monk, and you can do that situationally per key. But I don't think the visual is necessary. I think borders around a unit frame are better used for other things. So the visual is gone. And right now, Harsh Discipline is tracked naturally on the Smite key, which I don't think is the best way to do it, and they are changing that in the future. So what I've done is I have a Weak Aura that displays just a number of that Harsh Discipline stack, and I've put it on my penance to look just like the Smite would. So you'll notice on my penance is how I track my Harsh Discipline.
4,
Name of the game here is run your spells as much as possible, dodge ground damage, And here we go. So the first boss is our kind of Hail Mary. I think everyone's a little bit scarred from how it was built initially, but this is the first week where it was, some people would say nerfed, but I would say like corrected. I don't think it played right initially, and I think they made a correction that was necessary and makes it feel much less up to chance. Alright, so tank got away from me there a little bit. That's scary. And there goes our PI on the monk. And in this window we have enough time to run one of every spell. And just because that pull started without me, I had to go into Rapture here. That is a good time to look at my bars. And you'll see there's a dark blue value. That's the absorb, growing from the left. And I would have rather have been Holy Nova-ing there, but I had to prioritize keeping people alive with that Rapture. So I use KUI Nameplates. I don't think there's anything better. People say they live by Plater, but I just think that's because that's what they hear. I think KUI these days is the route to go. And you'll see all my tough mobs here, the big ones, are in a gray color. Helps you see them easily. I try and put dots on the gray ones. Uh-oh. Penance for the win. Speed boost with Penance is really nice. But in these trash pulls, even though there's big mobs and little mobs, I'm trying to cast Penance on cooldown to spread my dot. It's worth the global because these pulls last so long, it doesn't hurt to get extra dots out. But Schism and Nova, whoa, tank's getting low. Schism and Nova is a great play. Side note, I really miss Boon, but having Holy Nova built into our book like it is nice too. So looking at my spells, I missed my Shadow Fiend back there. I should have cast it initially on the first pull because there is enough time for it. But it was a little hectic and I dropped one Shadow Fiend. Not the biggest loss, but it is a loss. So, quick drink. I made a weak R that changes my screen red when I'm drinking. I noticed in the past I had moments where I thought I was regenning, and I was actually just standing there. So I wanted a visual to help me see it. Also for this boss, I have the Sparky Potion. I think I used it. Let's see what I do here. But on the opener, you want your first cast basically to be Schism, because you have enough room for one round. And also you'll notice on the tank unit frame, it has a red dotted line. I've done that for all bleeds and dent armors. So red dotted line means heal. And in this moment right here, there goes our PI. It's really important I build a Penance proc, but I also want a Holy Nova too. And you'll see my Ancient Branch is green, makes it really easy to see him. KUI Nameplates. I dropped that Penance proc into a Rapture for the Wheel and Woe. We are all full health, full shields, and here comes the Burst Forth, which barely does anything. It's because we all had shields. So I fade on the rip. I do not want aggro. I did pop my potion, Divine Star, Holy Nova. First round, no problem. So whenever there's a red dotted line on my tank, to me that kind of just means keep a renew up. That's kind of how I think about it. So in this time, I'm trying to just make sure I have a Penance proc ready. A couple Holy Novas in the interim.
5,
Shadow Fiend is
4,
out.
3, 2.
Grip for the win with the Thundering. I use it a lot. People probably don't like it, but saves pulls. And Burst Forth is coming. I'm tracking only 2 items with bigwigs. I lay a barrier, and we're all fine. And the tank should be in my barrier. It looks like he's right outside of it. No, he's in it. So for this fight, you always need a poison dispel in your comp. That's the monk. And I noticed the boss is just about dead, and just to ensure the tank lives, I go into a rapture focused solely on the tank. And boss 1 down. I think there was a pain sup in there somewhere too. I think it was on the first burst forth, or after the burst forth rather. The way I see it is there's 2 burst forths. The first one is pain sup, the second one is barrier, or vice versa. But this guy, kind of just a time sink. All you really need to worry about is the tornadoes he throws out. They kind of spawn quickly, so you have to, have to be ready to move. And also here, if you notice my tank frame, it'll have the dotted line of the targeted spell. That is the tank slam from this guy. I think it's called Storm Slash. It's like a 1 second cast. Yep, but you want to shield and get ahead of it, if you can. I've loaded that weak aura, which isn't mine by the way, I'm not the author, but I've loaded it with all the appropriate spells for Season 1, and I've tried to eliminate low priority targeted spells and more just like medium to high priority. So you'll see right there, there was 2 in a row where I got ahead of it with a shield, and that's the best way to play it. That guy is down. So I forget exactly how I play my cooldowns here, but we have time before boss, so you do want to dump cooldowns if you have them. Spread my dot with Penance, Divine Star, spam Holy Nova. And again you see the red dotted line on my tank, that is for the bleeds. Trying to drink where I can. And right here you'll notice the Alpha Eagle. This is another feature of KUI Nameplates. He is full opacity where everyone else is lesser opacity. That is my system for marking schism-worthy targets. I've gone through all my dungeons and selected the healthier mobs per pack, and I have them stand out at full opacity, and that's kind of how I track who I'm targeting and where I'm giving schism to. The worst way to play schism, let's say if this is your pull, if you schism one of those little guys, territorial eagles, that guy, he's probably going to die while schism is active, so you're going to have loss there. So that's not a good way to play schism. It's better to go on one of the stronger enemies that are a bigger threat, that have more health. And I've done that for all my packs. I do have 2-piece here, so 2-piece buffs your next spell after shield. I think it's meant to be more of just like a passive increase, but I do try and use it to my advantage when I can, and mainly it's when I have a double penance proc, like the Harsh Discipline and Power of the Dark Side. I definitely want to play 2-piece to my advantage there and buff that penance. Sometimes I'll drop a shield if I'm casting Mind Games, but mainly when I have a Dark Penance proc with 7 ticks and Schism, I'll cast a shield just to buff that spell. Alright, so here we go. We have Bird. So off the top, let's see, how do I play this? Ooh. Yep, so you'll see there's a white dotted line on the tank anticipating the attack. Red dotted line is the bleed. So that AoE attack hurts more and more as you go. It's perfect for Rapture, but not on the first one. And not on the second one either. So in this time, I'm just pumping as much as I can, focusing on the tank here. Tank healing is probably going to be the most important thing about this fight on Tyrannical. I get a penance proc coming into this next Screech, where I drop Rapture. It's always a good idea to Rapture your tank first, because it gives you an opportunity to go back and refresh his shield. You have less loss on the Rapture that way. And that's right, so this was... They called it a strategy, but I thought it was a bad play. The tank is playing on the precipice of these steps. And it's causing me to lose line of sight. So this entire key I'm like fighting to find people. And that, if you're wondering, was a misplay. We were not supposed to have that many stacks of the mechanic. Thankfully no one died. But I let out Shadow Fiend, and there is our PI to recover. But PI's out. And on those Screeches, in between the heavy ones, definitely give your shield to someone. I usually favor just giving it to myself. But even though it's not a Rapture, you can still cast one shield on a friend. And that tank slam there, I got ahead of it with a shield, using that targeted attack weak aura. The author of that weak aura 2 is named Buds, by the way. I want to definitely give credit. It's not mine, but I have just adapted it to my uses. So Rapture's back up. We have a 2-stack. The next one's going to hurt more than the others. You'll notice I'm returning to the tank more often to refresh his, getting really good value out of that Rapture. And the Screeches are too far apart for one Rapture to affect both. So after a Screech, I'm not really wasting the mana to refresh shields. They're not going to last anyway. And for this one, we're a little tight, but I want to get in. Yeah, so I used wall, and I think I got on the very tip tail of that barrier there. Still holding on to Paints Up. Now's a perfect time just to get through this boss. And since people are getting out, yep, gave it a single shield to myself on that one. I'm trying to keep atonements out since we are all over the place. And again, these steps, I'm losing line of sight on people. Drop a second PI just because we're not playing around. This boss can truck, and at any given moment we can wipe. So drop PI. I think a better play there, if you watch it back, the monk had Zwin at the top of the boss pole and he held. That boss is long enough to get 2 rounds of spells. He should have popped Zwin immediately and he would have had Zwin again. But I don't like PIing someone outside of a window, so I held because I was just following his lead. Alright, and in these packs too, we have really good examples of these targeted spells. You'll see dotted lines on players, and you definitely want to get ahead of those with shields. So glancing at my available spells, yep, there's one. All I have is Rapture. I have Fiend as well. Getting all my dots out. Targeting the big guy. Yep, there goes Fiend. Shielded that ambush. And Schism for the Fiend. Getting melee range on Holy Nova-ing. Got ahead of that ambush, it didn't even touch him. I am spec'd into Double Death, which is a heal now. So also with KUI Nameplates, I have my nameplates change to white when in range. It's not a bad idea to get in the habit of, or in practice of, picking out mobs in execute range and getting that 20-second cooldown rolling. And I think I got ahead of every single ambush there, not a single one hit. So that's using shields to your advantage. Giving a shield proc is really nice. But even just a regular shield is nice too. So mainly what I like to do with the Wheel and Woe is I'll farm a penance proc, drop the penance, and then drop a fat shield. If there's no atonements need to be refreshed, I default it to smite. But I'm really not just casting shield willy-nilly, I'm casting it after a big penance proc. But there is PI on the hunter. And you might also notice right above my action bars I have a red cast bar pop up every now and then. That's also a new system I've implemented where there are a handful of spells per dungeon where your fear can interrupt a cast, and there's a handful of casts that can wipe a group. So I've programmed a little cast bar to come up on my screen when one of those type spells is being cast, and that's just my alert to Fear Bomb. Alright, so here we go. Laid a barrier down to open. I basically see that as 10 seconds to dot, and then I Schism and Holy Nova. I think the hunter is LOSing that ambush, so talk about pro status. So with that targeted cast weak aura, most targeted attacks are associated with an aura, which is arguably really easy to track. But a handful of them, there's no aura associated. So I'm not even sure what we're seeing here is the targeted spells weak aura. I think those are just auras that I'm tracking. That was a bomb that I got ahead of with a shield. And for a group like this, I opened with all my dots, Schism, Holy Nova. Running Divine Star on cooldown. And I think there's an argument to play Holy Nova, Halo instead of Divine Star. And I think that's fine. I think it's more preferential. The main difference I see is one is a cast, one is instant cast. And I just like having an instant cast in my book, an extra instant cast. So I think it's just whatever you want. Yeah, and for that bomb right there, you'll see there is an aura associated. So those are much more easy to track. But things like the bird boss that slams the tank, or that big elemental mob that slams the tank, those come from cast bars. And that is what that targeted spell's weak aura does. So, I do have a handful of regular weak auras that track with a dotted line. Same type of idea. If it's a dotted line, it's a warning. You want to get ahead of it like those bombs. But those are aura related. So anyway, here we go. We have this boss. The main cadence of this boss is you want to watch his energy. And when his energy reaches 100, that is where you want to have your Rapture out. PI's out on the monk. Open with a Schism, and I'm just pumping as much as I can while nothing's happening. And it is nice to toss some dispels out when you can. Alright, you'll see my red dotted lines here. Those are the warnings for the bombs. And we're approaching 100 energy. So I shield the whole group. And then I have plenty of time to re-shield after the attack. I was targeted. And I shielded myself as a defensive. Also, binding heals is really great. You can use it to your advantage if you play it right. Yeah, that's where I got in trouble. So I used wall there, but it wasn't really necessary. It did get me through that second fissure, but I could have made it through that second fissure without. And then I just pain sucked the tank when he really wasn't in any danger, and that was also somewhat of a problem, which you'll see in a second.
5.
So you don't really want to cast Mind Games unless Schism is up. The cooldowns line up just fine, so don't really cast Mind Games off Schism. And that's where I got in trouble. So Rapture did not come up in time. It had only barely come up. And I did Rapture myself, but it wasn't enough with the overlapping mechanics. We had the fissure and the bombs go out, and it caused a death. So looking at my available spells, there was really nothing I could do. It's just one of those cases where I might have lived if I had not wasted Pain Sup on the tank, or if I had not used wall too early. So later on in the fight is more of the bottleneck. You start having overlapping mechanics and people can die. But a quick battle res for the win, got right back up. Didn't even miss a beat. And for this, I open with Barrier, open with Star, Penance to spread my dots, Schism, and just Holy Nova. Radiance for the coverage. Mind Games to put it on cooldown. And we are spent. I have no cooldowns available. And you'll also notice by now, I'm so used to it I forgot to talk about it. I think everyone's seen it though. My bars at 35% and under will shift red, and that's my execute range for life. Life does nothing unless you're in that range. You want to... Most of the time it's a reactionary type spell, but a lot of the times you can use it in a calculated manner where you'll let someone dip and then bring in that life. So I'm a little bit off sync with my PI and the Hunter. Yep, but I drop it anyway. It's about 5 seconds late, but we're just off sync. But we have enough time for just one more. Okay, so... Okay, yeah, that Death Knight just ate all of that. Those guys are enraged, and they were whirlwinding, and he just stood in it. So I don't really want to use my 3-minute cooldowns, I don't think, because boss is next. Although it's not a hard boss, it's better to have cooldowns there. So Shadow Fiend, I think I save. Yeah, this tank is getting real ballsy. Yeah, so I was trying to get into position. I was trying to get an opener out. But I was targeted with a bomb and arcane missiles, and it was just too much. In hindsight, yeah, so I went to Rapture now. In hindsight, what I should have done as just like a soft opener is just go right into a Rapture covering everyone with shields, and that might have changed the pull, but those arcane missiles can really fuck you up. Without almost any warning. Plus I had that bomb on me. And also for the record, I think those bombs I think you can drop them on enemies. So if anyone wants to look that up and let me know. But I think you can drop it on enemies. I don't think anyone here did that, but I think it's really good play and really good damage to put it on an enemy. Alright, so we have this guy. The main thing is he has a frontal. He breathes. And it's a very quick cast. So you have to be quick to react. For big wigs, I have pretty much just everything turned off except an audible for the breath. We also have dispels. If it were fortified, I would never give one person 2 globals. But a really strong play is to shield and dispel. And you'll see right there on the Demon Hunter, that attack barely even landed on him. But that was a 7 proc penance Wheel and Woe shield. So it didn't even hit. I think that was a small shield. Dispel. It's not a bad idea either to keep party nameplates on. You want to be able to see where your allies are, because you don't want to instantly dispel. You want them to run to the outside of the room first. Penance, Wheel and Woe shield, dispel. And in a fight like this, you pretty much just want to roll Schism in all of your spells as much as possible. And this mechanic where you run out, there is no need to hit a speed boost or waste a global for that. It is very easy just to run out. Cast a couple instant cast spells while you run. Yeah, that breath is quick. Gotta really be light on your feet. So a Schism, a 7 penance proc, shield, dispel. That will still hurt him. Yep. Instant cast while I run out. And I think I said this before, but per Schism, you want to get 2 harsh discipline penance procs. Max DPS. Schism and a 7 penance. Shield, dispel. Oh, wall hit me. Mind games on the Schism. I think I shielded myself off by the dispel. Oop, that breath. Shield, dispel. And again, for a single mechanic like that, I really wouldn't ever want to waste 2 globals covering 1 person. But that bomb can hurt. It's not a bad play. Dropped the pain sap just because I could. Another Schism. Boom. And there it was. That was a 19 Algeth'ar's Academy as a Disc Priest. IO 2543 and climbing. And that was a really, really clean run. And I don't think I mentioned this yet, but as always, we want to stack haste and crit. We want crit for Aegis, Divine Aegis, and we want haste just because we always want haste. So for trinkets, I take a haste trinket and a crit trinket. I think it's all neither here nor there really, but I went for trinkets that buff my main stats because I think I can make better use of my main stats. So looking at my output for DPS, I glanced at, you'll have to go back there, but I look at what my crystalline reflection reflects, and it was over 1 million, so that's really good. And then I looked at what my divine Aegis absorbed, and off the top, I reduced the whole key by over 1 million. So that's pretty much what you want to do. And looking at the avoidable damage, I think this is the best avoidable damage meter I've ever seen. Three of us were under 1,000,000, which is really low. And then the tank as a Death Knight gambles with his health, so you don't really have to look at that one. And the Demon Hunter could have done better, but overall, this was a really smooth key where I didn't really have to do much except smite. And that's exactly what you want as a healer. You don't want to be making up for mistakes. You want to DPS. So for Pug, I thought this was really good. And for Dragonflight, I'm actually liking it so far. I do miss Boon, but I think playing a shieldy priest has been really fun. And I look forward to making more videos and learning these keys more and more. But Game Changer is the targeted cast weak aura. Author is Buds. I'm going to upload my version that has all of Season 1 spells loaded into it, but I just want you to know I'm not the author, but definitely want to use it as a Disc Priest. And until next time, guys, Disc.